Okay. All right, here we go. Hello and good evening, everyone. We're just going to wait a minute to let everyone log in because I see you all rolling in on my participants list. Thanks for being here tonight. Just wait like 30 more seconds. All right, why don't we go ahead and get started? Welcome to the Milwaukee Public Library's online Zoom session with our special guest, Melinda Myers, who is nationally known gardening expert, TV radio host, author, and columnist. She has written over 20 gardening books and is a big, huge Milwaukee Public Library friend and champion. Thanks so much for being with us tonight, Melinda. Tonight she's presenting 7 Steps to Managing Water Where It Falls in Your Yard. Just a little bit of housekeeping. My name is Beth. I will be in the background while Melinda is speaking. If you have any questions for Melinda, please use the Q&A functions. It helps me keep track of all your questions in the order they come in. Otherwise, you can chat amongst yourself in the chat box. There will be a PDF handout that I will attach once I turn my camera off, and you will also get that handout and a link to the recording in a couple days after we're through tonight. Again, any questions, just let me know. All right, I'm going to turn it over to you, Melinda. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Beth. And thanks to all of you.
Wrong button.
That's okay. I thought you were done with me, Beth, so that's okay. Thanks to all of you for joining us as well. And with the recent rains, I think this is a very timely topic, always important. I grew up in Ohio and moved to Milwaukee many years ago. And I remember talking about water and living by the Great Lakes. I always thought water was something plentiful. And we've learned how precious our water is. Too much or not enough seems to be wherever you garden the issue. So let's talk about 7 ways to manage that water that falls on your landscape. As always, I like to thank those who sponsor, make it possible for me to provide these webinars for you for free. Fresh Coast Guardians, you'll learn more about them. People just like you who are concerned about keeping the Great Lakes clean and good quality water and our waterways, and things that we can do to help make that happen. Milwaukee Metro Sewage District, who are also partners for a cleaner environment. Thanks to both of them for sponsoring this. Thanks to Milwaukee Public Library. That's right, I'm a huge fan of Milwaukee Public Library and appreciative of all they do to help me reach all of you. So let's get started. Water matters, and I think most of you know it, but when I was living in the city, I was always amazed how people looked at the storm sewers almost as a trash can. I'd see them sweeping debris into the storm sewer, hosing off out the alley, their driveway into the storm sewer, thinking that just disappears. But you're here, so you probably know this, but you can help me spread the word that everything we do on our property has the potential to end up in the storm sewer, and then that ends up into the river and lakes, and eventually has to get clean for us to have drinking water. Well, one way we can manage it is to have healthy landscapes. And besides that, managing stormwater, it's a beautiful place to spend time. I think we're all anxious for spring to arrive. I took a little time out yesterday and walked around my garden to check out what was blooming, what has survived this crazy winter weather, and was rewarded to find lots of bulbs I plant were flowering and lots of pollinators were already out there. So a healthy landscape is going to help keep water where it falls in your yard. And that's good because it provides the water our plants need, but it also grows a beautiful landscape. And besides that, there's some other things you can do. And there's a link on the handout to a publication by MMSD on the things that help manage rainwater. And we're going to talk about a few of those, mainly from a plant perspective, but things that you can do: fixing leaky windows, making sure the foundation is solid and filling any of those cracks. If there's a problem with grading, making sure that the soil grades away from your house, that your sump pump is in working order and your gutters are clean. So, a few things that you can do. This was my old house in the city of Milwaukee. And as you can see, I took to heart having all the surface covered with plants. But a healthy landscape starts from the ground up. It's not the part that's the most beautiful part we like to talk about. When I taught at Milwaukee Area Technical College, I'd always told my students if you can sell soil preparation to your customers, you're a good salesperson. Because as gardeners, what do? We drag people out to see our cool new plant, the flowers in bloom, the butterflies visiting. Only a few of us are geeky enough to show them our great soil. But if you're a gardener, you already know that good soil means a good, healthy garden, and it also absorbs stormwater. Now, this is ideal soil. We've got that organic humus layer, topsoil that takes 100 years for nature to build 1 inch of topsoil. So that tells you how important that soil is. Below that, the subsoil. And what often happens when during construction is when they dig the foundation for our homes, they scrape off the topsoil. They used to sell it. Now more and more companies are stockpiling it to put back on your property. But often that subsoil is spread over the surface, then 1 inch of topsoil added, a couple trees, sod thrown on top, and it's called a landscape. You then spend the next years trying to fix that soil and grow a healthy landscape. So, a soil test, I know not all of you are going to do it, but a soil test is a good place to start. When you're doing a new garden, it tells you what that soil contains. You let the soil testing lab in Wisconsin, it's UW Soil Testing Lab, and then you tell them what you're growing, and they tell you what, if any, nutrients you need to add. If you're having problems in an area, let's say you've got a garden that just isn't growing well, or maybe your lawn on the side is not doing well, you take a sample just from that area, send that in, explain the problem, what you're growing, and they can decide if it's a nutrient issue. And then every few years, it's just a good idea to see if you're on track with your maintenance. Adding organic matter is one way we can improve our soil. It improves drainage in heavy clay soil, and it improves the water holding ability of sandy soil. I left the city of Milwaukee after 26 years. I had converted my yard into a garden, lots of organic matter, organic mulches. I had great soil. I moved out into the country, so I have a little more space to do my profession and my hobby, but now I have pure sand. And so I'm working on building my sandy soil to hold more moisture. It's great when there's a lot of rain, but when it's a dry summer like we had last year and the year before, that means more watering for me. So, compost. There's a lot more benefits to compost than just the water holding ability. One, it provides a lot of essential nutrients to your plants. So, that means you're going to fertilize less. Research, and I think this was out of Cornell University, found that soil that's been amended with compost grows healthier plants and they have fewer insect and disease problems. It also, if you're composting your plant based kitchen scraps and garden waste, it also keeps that out of the landfill. Reduces rainwater and fertilizer runoff into our waterways because that makes our soil act like a sponge and it absorbs that storm water. It holds on to those nutrients so they don't wash out. It keeps rainwater, as I mentioned, where it falls, and that means you'll be watering less and conserving more. So how much do you add? Well, ideally, you would add 1 inch of compost for every 2 inches of soil. Now, that may not be practical, so you may be doing that over time. But if you can add a few inches to the top 8 to 12 inches of soil, that's a good place to start. The other thing you can do is, let's say you have existing gardens and you don't want to start over. You would like to improve their health and reduce fertilizing. Top dressing with compost, adding about 1 inch of compost every other or every third year, research has found provides most, if not all, the nutrients that perennials need. And so the or soil organisms will help pull that compost into the soil, mix it in. And so you're doing all the same things you would do by tilling it in just over a longer period of time with the help of nature. So if you do have a garden that's just not doing well and your top dressing isn't doing everything you'd like, you could do vertical mulching as you see here. So you could either spread the compost over the surface, take your auger bit and run it into the soil to push that compost down near the plant roots, but it also helps aerate the soil. Or you could do what we did here, which was drill the hole, add some compost, and smooth it over. Either way, you're aerating the soil, working compost in, improving the health and vigor of your plants. Many of you may have heard about no-till gardening. That's been a big movement. I grew up with a father who always spayed aged manure from the family farm, his family's farm, into the garden. And so we had great soil. And so I grew up thinking you always turn the garden. No-till is really not a new technique, but bringing awareness to the fact that the less we till, the better for our soil. Tilling brings up weed seeds. Tilling adds oxygen, breaks down the organic matter faster. And if you do it, especially at the wrong time of year, you end up damaging the soil structure. So one thing that I've been doing a lot lately because of my sandy soil, and I don't have 26 years to fix it, I've been doing lasagna gardening. And the idea is building layers of organic matter to create a planting mix. Hugelkultur gardening, whoops, sorry, click too much. Hugelkultur gardening takes that one step further. So basically what you do is you take logs and twigs and leaves and make your first layer. This is my Hugelkultur garden. And as I mentioned, I have sandy soil. I also have a lot of wind. So I started my Hugelkultur garden below ground. Most people do it on the soil surface. So I dug out a trench, as you can see, about 18 inches deep. And then I layered the logs, no black walnut, no black walnut, no black locust, and no cedar. Cedar and black locust break down too slowly. Black walnut is toxic. So we want to avoid those, fill it with branches, and then you do your lasagna gardening on top, adding green debris. And so as you can see from this picture, you would measure out your garden, put a layer of newspaper and or cardboard, and then just like you're composting, 8 to 10 inches of organic matter, a little bit of compost and fertilizer. You continue to layer till it's 18 inches tall. With hugelkultur, we'll top this off with a lasagna garden. This is a great way to create a planting mix. So this is my lasagna garden, and I have a large area that's fenced in for testing plants and growing vegetables. And so I started this right on soil. I didn't put it in a raised bed frame. Instead, I just left it freestanding. But if you're considering a raised bed garden, this is a great way to create your own planting mix. You're recycling all that yard waste, kitchen scraps, worm castings, if you do worm composting, to create great soil and plant a garden. This is a hugelkultur garden someone sent me that I appreciated that she shared it. Look how beautiful it is. So you can see that change in elevation where she built up the soil, planted a garden. Over time, it does eventually settle down. In hugelkultur gardening, the logs absorb moisture and release it back in. It breaks down slowly, releasing nutrients. You've probably seen that happen naturally in the woods when you take a hike and a log's fallen on the ground. It's taking that concept and putting it to work in your garden. We also want to, so we're building our soil. That's one thing we can do, but we also need to protect our soil, and we can protect it with mulch or plantings. Because when we get a heavy rain, and we're having more and more episodes of heavy rain, that can compact the soil, that can lead to erosion. By covering the soil surface with mulch or with plants, we help protect that soil. We reduce the risk of compaction, we reduce the risk of erosion. And then here it just made a nice pathway. Mulch also suppresses weeds as it decomposes. Organic mulches add organic matter and nutrients, so it builds the soil over time, and it helps moderate soil temperatures. Think about how hot it was last summer and how dry. Bare soil can be up to like 104 and 105 degrees, where covered soil is much cooler, better for the plants. So leaf mulch is one of my favorite mulches. It's free. So instead of raking your leaves to the curb in the fall, gather them up or put them in your planting beds around your perennials, bag them, use them next year for your annual beds. put them in your compost pile, but they do make great mulch. They weave together. I find that if I put them down, I water them in right away, and that prevents them from blowing in really windy days. But a layer just a couple inches thick does great things, and they're home for beneficial insects. And you could also use evergreen needles and cones. They won't make your soil too acidic. They're great to walk on barefoot. They smell good. The picture on the right is my friend Paul's garden. And the first time I visited him, it smelled like I was in northern Wisconsin, that, woodland smell with all the evergreen cones. And they're pretty too. Now, if you're buying compost, mulch, or any soil, ask the provider about jumping worms. These are invasive worms that come in on mulch, compost, plants. People share a plant, they sometimes share the jumping worms. And so it's really important for us to try to avoid the problem. And if you have jumping worms in your property, always wear clean boots, clean your tools before you go to a friend's garden to help them out. And I know it's hard to say no thanks, but unless you know your friend doesn't have jumping worms, it's better for them to keep their own plants. It's a question that I've been asking. We had some work done on our property a couple of years ago, and ask all the providers if it was an issue. The second thing we can do is add some rain barrels. And if you haven't done it, consider doing this now. They're a great way to capture rainwater off the roof, collect it to use to water gardens. You can collect up to over 620 gallons of water off a 1,000 square foot roof in a 1-inch rain. So start by disconnecting, putting a rain barrel by one downspout. Start with one, and as you gain experience, see how you manage that water. Then you can start putting rain barrels at other downspouts off your house. Maybe you start with the garage, but it's a great way to capture water because we tend to have a lot of water at one time and then nothing. And so that allows you to capture and use the water later. And they're much more decorative than they used to be. When you're selecting your rain barrel, there are a couple of things to watch for. Either have one that has a screen to keep the debris out, or in this case, it has a place for the downspout to go directly into the rain barrel, and the rest is a solid top. The spigot should be low on the ground so you don't have water stagnating, and you need to have an overflow. So when that 50-gallon rain barrel fills up, you can put the water either back in your downspout, and I'll show a diverter, out into the lawn area or into an adjoining rain barrel. And then you need to have it on a stand to elevate it because it empties by gravity. This is a downspout diverter. And if you're in the Milwaukee Metro Sewage District, they have a whole setup you'll see in a minute for hooking up a downspout diverter. And so what happens here is this rain barrel is hooked into the downspout, and before it fills up, water goes down and it goes into the rain barrel. Once the rain barrel is full, it closes that diverter, so then the rainwater goes into the downspout and away from the house. I mentioned you can also interlock your rain barrels, and that interlocking happens at a high level on the rain barrel. So one fills up, the water goes into the next one, and you can do more than two. But that's a great way to increase the amount of water you can collect. Now, this is from Fresh Coast Guardians to give you an idea of how to install your rain barrel.
Hi, I'm Zach from MMSD and Fresh Coast Guardians. Today I'm going to show you how to install your very own rain barrel. So the first step to installing your rain barrel is to choose your spot. Every rain barrel should be about a few feet away from a downspout. So for this rain barrel, we've chosen this downspout here, and we're going to put the rain barrel right here. After you choose your spot, you're going to prepare your area. So for this spot here, there's already some mulch down. We're going to have to clear this away so we can make a nice level base. After you've cleared your base, you're going to want to put down some gravel. This will help create a nice level spot for your cinder blocks. And then you're going to use one of the cinder blocks to help tamp that down and make it nice and firm. After you've created that level base with the gravel, you put down your cinder blocks, and then you're going to want to level them. We have this big level tool, but if you don't have something like this, you can always use an app on your phone. So what you're going to do is going to make sure that it's level this way and level this way for each cinder block. In order to prepare your rain barrel, you're first going to want to attach the spigot and the drain. To attach the spigot and the drain, you're going to want to put it on these pieces first. This creates a seal and a place for you to screw in your spigot and drain. Next, you're going to screw in these pieces. The spigot will go on the top spot and the drain will go on the bottom. To finish preparing your rain barrel, you're going to be drilling into the side of the barrel. This will connect your diverter piece through a tube into the barrel to feed it water. To do that, you're going to use a small hole saw provided in your kit and choose the appropriate side. For this rain barrel, we're going to choose the left side because that's closest to the downspout. Next, you're going to measure on the downspout in order to drill a hole to put the diverter in. What we're going to do is level from the top of the barrel, and then we're going to mark 3 inches down. We're going to be drilling into the downspout. To do this, you'll want to use the large hole saw provided in your kit, and you're going to want to use safety gloves and safety glasses. To put in the diverter piece, pinch the sides, insert it into the downspout. To secure the diverter, use the 2 screws provided in your kit and screw them into the 2 spots around the diverter. Next, you'll insert the tube into the diverter. So just stretch it out, and you'll shimmy it back and forth into the diverter, secured in place. Once your rain barrel is all set up, you put the lid on. There's 2 options. One of them can be like this, just the normal design. You can see there's a little sunflower here, looks pretty nice. The other option is to flip it upside down and put in the filter piece. This then acts like a planter, and you can fill it with shallow rooted flowers and herbs, or just a potted plant even.
So around Halloween, you're gonna wanna winterize your rain barrel. You're just gonna disconnect the connection, put on the winterizing cap, then you're gonna store the barrel upside down in a garage or in a basement for the winter, and then you can bring it back out around Earth Day.
So we recommend checking your gutters and your diverter piece regularly if it's not functioning properly and or just as a regular checkup.
If possible, we recommend using the water in your barrel 2 to 3 days after a storm.
For more information, make sure to check out freshcoastguardians.com.
Now, obviously, it's going to vary a little bit based on the rain barrel you select, but hopefully that gives you at least a general idea of how you can make that happen and how easy it is, relatively easy it is to do. One of the big questions I get about rain barrels is, what about mosquitoes? Well, one reason for the screen and also having a solid lid where it's just directed directly or with a diverter, it limits the access by the adult mosquitoes. However, you could just toss a mosquito dunk in your rain barrel and that'll give you 30 days control. The water is safe. It's a naturally occurring soil bacteria that kills only the larvae of mosquito, fungus, gnats, and black flies. So if you're concerned about mosquitoes, you could throw one of those in. Make sure with your rain barrel you provide easy access, because if you're going to use the water, if it's too hard to get to, it's not going to happen, right? And then masking it. How do you blend it in? You found a place for your trash cans, but this is right up next to your house. Well, some of the rain barrels are very pretty, as you saw, but how about this? Just a potted plant or a planting in front of it, something easy to move. Make it into a piece of art. And if you're not a great artist, Dawn, who works with me, is a great artist, but I'm not the greatest artist. So using stencils is another option. And then what about using the water? Rutgers University did some research and they found that the bacterial levels of the water coming off of roofs generally was within the safe levels to use on edible plantings. Their recommendation, however, is have your water tested if you're planning on using it on edible plants. Otherwise, there's usually, most of us have plenty of ornamental containers, maybe use it to wash your car or lawn furniture. So other purposes, if you're concerned about water quality, definitely have the water tested if you're going to use it on edibles. But what a great resource to put to work in your landscape. Another option, depending on where you live and how big your yard is to disconnect and then run the water from your roof and downspout into your yard. Now, many of you may already be there, but some of the older sections of the city, all of their downspouts go into the combined sewer system. So when it rains, that water goes in with the storm water going down the storm sewers, and that's how we get a lot of too much pressure on our water treatment plants. So if possible, that's one option, but always check first. We just did a video for Fresh Coast Guardians. I think it should be up soon this year, talking about you want to make sure that that water will be directed at least 5 feet away from your house and 5 feet from your property line. And that's really important that it is allowed. If you're in a small city lot, my daughter, for example, there's no way she can divert water to 5 feet away from the property line or her house. Her yard's pretty small. So she's going to be doing rain barrels and diverters, downspout diverters, to try to reduce the amount of rainfall that goes in the storm sewer. So that's one thing we can do to help. The third thing is plant a rain garden, and some of you may have been doing it. I did a webinar hosted by Milwaukee Public Library, so it's on their YouTube channel, on how to plan and then selecting plants for your rain garden. If you are in the Milwaukee Metro Sewage District and you're not aware, they do have a deal every spring. So it's passed for this year, but maybe in the planning process, keep them in mind for next year, that you can buy plants up to 50% off, and plants that are sometimes hard to find at your local garden center. So why plant a rain garden? It's pretty. It's a beautiful garden. It's just got a little bit different design features to help capture water. The goal of a rain garden is to take the water that lands on the roof, hard surfaces in your lawn, capture it in the garden, let the plants and the soil filter any impurities out before it recharges the groundwater. So we want it to be beautiful. It helps keep water where it falls on your property. It manages that storm water, and as you can see, it invites pollinators and songbirds to your garden. So if you're planning a rain garden, check out the Department of Natural Resources. This is Wisconsin. Some others have it, but this guide is used by gardeners all over. But they take you step by step through the process of how to plan your rain garden, all that's involved in what size do you need for the amount of water that you're directing to your rain garden. Very easy to follow. It's free to download and print out. There's a link on your handout. You do need to keep a couple things in mind when you're locating your rain garden. You want it, if possible, 10 feet from your foundation, at least 6, because you don't need more water near your basement, right? We're trying to keep it out of the foundation. No more than 30 feet, because if you get too far away, you're capturing water all the way from the roof to the walk along the lawn, and you're going to need a really big rain garden. Notice, if possible, that the broadest part, the widest part of the garden is perpendicular to the downspout. That's designed so it can capture the water so it doesn't run off. And if possible, keep that downspout as close to the center of the garden as possible. You are going to need to prepare the soil, because here's the idea. The idea of a rain garden is once it's established, those plants should be fairly drought tolerant. So you're not going to want to have to water your garden except during extended drought periods. And we've had a couple of those these last couple of years, most of us across the country. We also want water to drain out within 24, no more than 48 hours. So this is not a garden. It's not a water garden. It's not something where you're going to have standing water for days. It's a garden that's going to capture, drain within 24 to 48 hours. You're going to need to direct the water from the downspout to that rain garden, as you saw on that diagram earlier. And they've put stones here because when you get a lot of water running off the roof in a heavy rainstorm, there's a lot of force behind that water. The stone helps break down that speed so it doesn't erode the soil away in your garden. Now, as you're directing it, you need to make it easy to maintain. Now, here they went under an existing walkway. You may want to bury the pipe that goes out, create a swale, because if it's hard to manage the grass and the plantings around it, it's going to be a mess. It's going to be a problem. I helped install a rain garden at a residential setting where the people who managed the landscape, it was an apartment building, the people who managed the landscape, I think, disconnected the downspout because they knocked the extension off and it was disconnected from the building. So we ended up burying a pipe to run the water, flexible drain pipe to run the water from the downspout to the garden, covered it with sod so that it wouldn't get disconnected by the maintenance people. As I mentioned, you want to direct it away from your house. This is Retzer Nature Center in Waukesha County. If you live in southeast Wisconsin, they put an addition on their building. And what I liked about this is they planned for managing the water. So all the water ran into the gutter. The gutters were directed in to these pergolas, these arbors that you can see coming out where the rain chain connects. So the water collects in the gutter and they directed it so they go through these extensions of the gutter down the rain chain and into the rain garden. And they use stone underneath the rain chain, again, to break the velocity, slow the water so it wouldn't wash away the soil. When we're looking at plants that tolerate drought and flooding. So not every plant can be grown in a rain garden because some plants just don't tolerate it. Some plants need moist, well-drained soil all season long. So we often look to many native mesic prairie plants, those that are designed to take flooding and drought. And we design those so the more moisture tolerant plants are in the center where the water tends to stand longer, and the more drought tolerant plants are along the edge that dries out more quickly. These were just a few of the plants provided at the MMSD plant sale. Number 4, grow more native plants. There's been a lot of buzz about growing native plants, no pun intended here, and they do a lot of great things for our landscape. Many of you may already be growing them. In fact, purple coneflower is the #1 most popular native plant that you see in almost every garden. Now, native plants support pollinators, beneficial insects, and songbirds. They all evolved together. So those were the plants that the birds, the bees, the butterflies, the hummingbirds, the songbirds ate the seeds that they all depend upon. They also build our soils. You know, I mentioned a lot of soils are disturbed when they build our homes. There are some plants known as clay busters that have deep roots that break through that heavy clay soil, and those that really work well at breaking down the clay. And when their old roots die, they're adding organic matter to the soil. Prairie Nursery, based in Westfield, Wisconsin, has lots of good information on preparing the soil, starting native plantings, and then a group of plants that he identifies as clay busters. So it's a good point of reference if you're looking for more information and the plants to consider. They also prevent erosion because they're deeply rooted. So when water is running down your lawn, they stand tall. They, again, intercede. So they slow down the velocity, stop some of that water, directing it into the ground below. And how they do that is with their deep roots. So they're creating those channels in our soil, not only adding organic matter as the old roots die in those channels, but opening up the soil so that when water does go through the garden or passes by a native plant, some of that goes down those channels before it charges the rainwater. And many of the impurities are washed out or cleaned out thanks to the plant roots and the soil. Once your garden is established, you need to do minimal fertilization. The blue flowered plant there is Baptisia, false blue indigo, one of my favorites. It's a beautiful plant, big and bold. It's also in the legume family, so it fixes nitrogen with the help of a soil bacteria. So it's actually adding nitrogen to the soil that it and other plants can use. Again, you don't have to water often once established. Now, it takes a year or two, and especially if we have extended drought, you're going to be watering. But once they're established, these are the last gardens you usually need to water. And then, of course, you're going to need to divide as those plants grow and thrive and get a little too big for the space. Make sure whatever you plant, it's the right plant for the growing condition. There are ornamental plants that people add to rain gardens as well. And even native plants, you need to select carefully. Some are fast spreaders and can take over a garden quickly. So you want to be very careful. I love cup plant. Now I have room and a place in mind to put it in my property, but I have space. But on a small city lot, that could end up being the only plant, not only in your rain garden, but on your whole landscape. So make sure you've got the plant that thrives in the sunlight. that is in existence, that it's the right size so that it'll fit, and that it's the right plant for your design. We want to make sure we have flowers spring, summer, and fall, not only for you to enjoy, but also for our pollinators and songbirds and things that provide winter interest, because winter can get to be pretty long. And if it wasn't for the birds visiting the landscape and eating the seeds, I might get a little crazier than I do normally in our winter weather. Again, match those plants to the growing conditions. And as I mentioned, suited to your design. This is Liatris. This is one that does reseed readily, but is one that's pretty easy to manage. Culver's root doesn't spread. It's a clumper, so it's a great one for small plants, for small gardens. Hoary verbane, sorry, is another one that tolerates drier soil. That's the one I grow, and it tends to be more of a clumper. Blue vervain is more tolerant, prefers moister soil. It's another clumper. Think about bee balm, a great plant, but it reseeds readily. So you'll be doing a little thinning, but it smells great. So I call it a little aromatherapy in spring as I thin out the unwanted plants. So how do you get started adding native plants? I know some people consider them weeds if they're not used properly, but any plant can be a weed if it's a plant out of place. So maybe before you go all out, start with making substitutions. Maybe something dies this winter, so you need to replace it. Well, fountain grass for us usually works there are perennial forms, but often serves as an annual in our area. But on the right is our native prairie dropseed. Notice a similar growth habit. The benefit of prairie dropseed, besides being a host for skippers, it's perennial and reliably hardy, has great fall color. You can see the flowers, and then the seeds, when they're covered with ice, look like little gems. So you get year-round interest with this plant while supporting pollinators, and you don't have to replace it every year. Then, when you're building your confidence, after you've replaced a few non-native plants with native plants, maybe you're ready to go all out. And so maybe you want to create a garden with all native plants. The white plant here is wild quinine. It's one of my favorite. It spreads, but not aggressively. I find it kind of weaves around my garden, kind of going slowly. On the right, that spiky plant is Liatris or gay feather. Oh, and also in the middle, behind the wild quinine, you can see a little purple coneflower on the right and some in the back, and a little bee balm as well. So look to nature and get some ideas of combinations that work well. If you decide to go all out, and I've been lucky enough to visit several gardens where people have converted their front yard to a prairie so they didn't have to mow a steep slope, their backyard. This is Stacy and Ken's backyard, and it's a steep hillside. Their house is at the bottom. The amazing part, between their prairie planting, their keyhole garden, they don't end up with water in their basement because they're stopping it all along the travels down that hill, and they have beautiful scenery to look for. But if you're going all out, you need to talk to your friends and neighbors and make sure they know. Put in signs of intent, whether it's a birdhouse, some garden art. When I lived in the city, I converted my front yard to all gardens. They weren't natives, but they were all gardens. Made my neighbors a little nervous, so I kept a strip of grass around a couple of the beds so they knew the yard was being tended, and this was intentional, that I gave up the sheared yews and the row of geraniums that came with the house when I bought it for a more informal look and a yard full of plants. But it took a while to establish it and get my neighbors to enjoy the view. The fifth thing we can do is plant trees if space is available. You all know on a hot summer day, there's no better place than to sit under the shade of a tree. It can cool our house, reducing energy cost. It can act as a windbreak, reducing heating cost. It helps absorb storm water as well. It's an amazing thing. More and more cities are looking at how they can add more trees to help manage storm water. And here's how trees help manage stormwater. As the rain falls, they intercept quite a bit of it in the canopy, and some of that evaporates right back in to the atmosphere, while others are slowed down and slowly reach the soil below, reducing the risk of erosion. Tree roots, ground covers, leaf litter help to promote absorption. Again, so we're not compacting the soil under the tree, that the water's not running off, and instead it's going down. And then As it goes through the canopy of the tree, some of the dust and pollutants are removed, and the same thing happens once it hits the soil before it recharges the groundwater. We do need to protect those trees, and lawnmowers and weed whips are one of the worst enemies along with drought. So mulch is a great option. I need to pull this mulch back a little further. It kind of kept going back. We want to keep the mulch several inches away from the trunk and as big of a mulch area as you can stand. Mulch, as I mentioned before, suppresses weeds, conserves moisture. Grass is a big competitor to trees. And so if we can keep grass away from newly planted trees, you're going to be amazed at the amount of growth. When I was teaching at MATC, I was teaching tree and shrub ID, and we had a catalpa tree on our campus in Mequon. And I remember the first year I was teaching, one of my students goes, "Well, that's not really a very big tree. It's not too big." Well, that was the spring of the fall of 94. That spring, we expanded the mulch bed quite a bit. It was the summer of 95, which was a hot, dry summer, if you remember. Nobody watered that tree, but the mere fact we expanded the mulch area, it helped conserve the moisture. That tree put on a good foot of growth, much more than it had in the past. And the maintenance people appreciated it because they didn't have to get out and hand trim. They had less area to mow. So it was a win-win for all of us. Don't over mulch, no volcano mulches, as I've heard them called. That's bad for the tree because that trunk is designed to be above ground. When we pile mulch on that surface, we encourage adventitious roots that grow out, they hit the oxygen, they end up girdling the trunk. It encourages root rot. If you've ever seen an overmulched tree go over in a storm, the trunk comes down where the mulch was piled and it rotted away, so it's indented, and then the root plate below. So don't do this. If you have this, start pulling it away because it'll be better for the tree. And then consider doing shade tolerant ground covers. If you can't stand mulch around the tree, or maybe as that tree's growing, or if you have the ability, use some shade tolerant ground covers, perennial ground covers, because you disturb the tree roots just once when you plant, or if you have to move them around. The majority of the tree feeder roots are in the top 12 to 18 inches, so we really don't want to get out there until often. Surface roots are often visible, and they often get hit by the mower, frustrating for the person cutting the grass, bad for the tree because it creates a wound and it opens it up to insect and disease problems. And bottom line, if it doesn't kill the tree, it's going to keep sending up surface roots. So planting ground covers that eventually mask those surface roots creates a better environment. Don't add topsoil, plant in the existing soil. But the tree's roots that are underground, the ground cover mulch, they all help absorb the moisture, the rainfall. If you're going to grow a lawn, do number 6 and have a stormwater friendly lawn, providing the proper care, because a healthy lawn can also help absorb moisture. We just want to manage it differently, perhaps, than you're doing now. Mow high if you don't already, 3.5 or 4 inches. Now, if you're used to cutting your grass really short, or the person you share your yard with prefers short grass, gradually raise the mowing height over time. They're not even going to notice. And pretty soon you're going to find that taller grass tolerates drought much more readily. It's the last lawn on the block to turn brown when the dry weather arrives. It forms deeper roots, as you see here, so that does let it gain water from a larger area. It's more insect and disease resistant, so you're going to have less problems because it's got a deeper root to absorb more nutrients to grow healthier turf. You're going to want to cut often so you don't end up with piles of clippings. If this does happen, run over the mower with the mower a couple times to break them down in size. It's kind of hard to keep up when we get lots of rain in spring when the lawn's growing quickly. But by mowing often, you can leave those short clippings on the lawn and they'll break down quickly, because a season worth of clippings is equal to 1 pound of nitrogen per year, and that's one fertilization. I was hearing one turf grass expert say that if you have an existing, an older established lawn that you've been fertilizing for years, you probably can get by with just leaving your grass clippings and maybe one fertilization to keep it good and healthy and reduce the weed issues. When when you mow in the fall, leave the leaves, cut them up with your mower. If they're smaller and you could still see the grass blades for those leaf pieces like this, if they're like the size of a quarter or smaller, it's not going to hurt your lawn. It will break down and add organic matter and nutrients more than the lawn can handle. That's when I put my bagger on. If I don't want to go over the lawn a couple times, put my bagger on, collect those leaves and use them as mulch in the garden. So that's a great way to have your lawn take advantage of the nutrients and organic matter those leaves provide, and if needed, move them to other parts of the landscape. Use a sharp blade, and yes, I know I needed to clean my mower, but a sharp blade makes a huge difference. You'll use 22% less fuel, your plants will use less water, and you can mow faster. And so a lot of benefits. Plus, it makes a clean cut, so it looks better, but that clean cut closes quickly, and that's why it loses less moisture. Watering. When you have a lawn, there's always that, do you water, don't you water, how do you water, how often? That's a decision only you can make. Allowing your lawn to go dormant is one way to be water wise. Most northern lawns will tolerate drought and recover, and you probably found that out the last couple of years. Yes, you'll have more weeds, but you won't have spent a lot of money and time watering the lawn trying to keep it green. You can see this gardener put her priorities with the trees and the shrubs, the more long-lived members that can't tolerate drought as well, and let her lawn go dormant. If we are having an extended drought, if you could give the lawn a 1/4 inch of water every 3 or 4 weeks, what they found is that keeps the crown of the plant alive, but the lawn remains dormant. Because the lawns that suffer the most are the ones that go dormant. Then you go, oh no, my lawn's brown. You water, 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 bring it out of dormancy, get your water bill, or there's a restriction placed, and then you let it go brown. Those that go in and out of dormancy because of you, not because of nature, are the ones that are stressed. So leave it dormant if you're going to let it go dormant. And then reduce your mowing, your watering. You know, you only have weeds to mow. Try to avoid as much foot traffic on that, and don't use herbicides, because if you use herbicides on your dormant lawn, yeah, you'll kill the weeds, but new weeds will be the first to grow. Now, if you decide to water, water thoroughly, but only when needed. When you can see your footprints in the lawn, like you see here, it's time to water. Some people will take a screwdriver. If you can't push it through, it's time to water. Provide a good inch of water. In clay soils, 1 application a week. In sandy soils, you want to make 2 applications about every 4 days. So how much is an inch of water? Put out a couple tuna fish cans, hook up your sprinkler, if that's how you're doing it, turn on the sprinkler, probably full blast, and put several cans out. When there's an inch of water in those cans, you know you've applied an inch of water. So, okay, I turn my spigot full blow, I put my sprinkler on this setting, and it took this many minutes to provide an inch of water before moving it to the next spot. So then you've calibrated it once for the season. And try to water early in the morning. You'll lose less to evaporation, and the winds usually are less in the morning, so less of it ends in place you don't intend to water. Fertilization. Now you're going to base your fertilization on how you use your lawn. Is it one that the kids play in often? Maybe you have a mini golfing, putting green on your lawn, or maybe you just want to look at pretty green grass and you just want it to keep your feet from getting muddy when it rains. So think about how you're going to use it. The more use it receives and the higher your quality goals, the more often you're going to need to fertilize. So basically, we look at Memorial Day, because fertilizing then helps prepare the lawn for the summer, but it doesn't push a lot of growth, that much more growth that it's already doing in spring, top growth that is. Then again in Labor Day to recover from, and these are northern lawns, to recover from the summer stresses. And then sometime between Halloween and Thanksgiving before the ground freezes. Now, if you're growing a warm season crop, if any of you have joined us from the South, Easter, and then there are some blackout dates. So check that. Labor Day and no later than 6 weeks before your first fall frost, first hard fall frost. So if you leave your clippings, if you're looking for a moderate to low quality, 1 application, Labor Day would be great. 2, Labor Day and Halloween timeframe. Those would be 2 times to fertilize. You can reduce weeds by up to 50% with just one fertilization. Now, if you know me, I'm a fan of Milorganite. I used it even before I started working with them. It's low nitrogen, slow release. Whether you use Milorganite or if you use another fertilizer and you haven't had your soil tested, think about a low nitrogen organic type fertilizer. Research found with Milorganite, when the microorganisms worked on releasing the nutrients from the pellets, it released some of the phosphorus and potassium bound to the soil, made it available to our plants. Most urban and suburban soils are high to excessive in phosphorus and potassium. And a lot of that comes from years of using 10-10-10, 20-20-20 fertilizer, winterizing fertilizers, because the plants use nitrogen in higher quantities and the excess leaches out of the soil, where phosphorus and potassium are used in smaller amounts by the plant and tend to stay bound to the soil. And so make sure you're applying the nutrients the plants need. You'll save money, your lawn will do better. And then always sweep clippings and fertilizers off the walks and drives, because when it rains, where do they go? Into the storm sewer. We'd rather have them back on the lawn where they're doing some good. You may want to aerate your lawn, not as a yearly practice. We aerate our lawn if the soil is compacted. That's the reason to aerate, not because it's spring or fall. We typically like to aerate an actively growing lawn. For northern lawns, fall is a great time to do it when the lawn's recovered from the stress of summer and before, good 6 weeks before we get a good hard freeze. We're core aerating. We're pulling out cores of soil. And if you can find someone who will top dress with compost, or you do it, all that compost will go in those holes left by the core aerator, creates a nice layer of compost to help break down any thatch, improve the soil, and you'll get great benefits on your lawn. And keeping your lawn healthy is the best way to prevent weeds. When weeds do occur, small populations, you can dig them out by hand. It's a great way to burn calories. That was practical on my small city lot because I had very little grass, so hand digging was an option. Just removing it, roots and all, depending on that plant that you're pulling out. And that's a great way to remove that. Leave that soil behind and go. Or maybe you're going to use an eco-friendly product. Corn gluten meal is a pre-emergent that we put on the lawn about the time the forsythia, they're just finishing blooming, when the Van Hoot spireas are in bloom. Some people call them bridal spireas. You put your first application. University of Minnesota found that one spring and one fall application, 3 years in a row, reduced weeds by up to 80%. What I applied here was a iron-based herbicide, and it was Faheta. It's a chelated iron, not the fertilizer level, but a stronger level that kills broadleaf weeds. So that dandelion eventually will turn black. If I got any on the surrounding grass, then that grass turns a deep green, but it kills the top and the roots. So Faheta, sold as EcoSense. Check the active ingredients to make sure you're getting an organic product. It should say OMRI certified. It's a little pricier, but if you have a small to medium yard or you're looking to avoid synthetic herbicides, this would be an option. And if you do go with regular synthetic chemical fertilizer, spot treat. Don't apply it to the whole yard. If your yard is 60% or more weeds, you've got some work to do, and you might want to consider either starting over, doing some overseeding, or a little more aggressive way to build the lawn to reduce the weeds. Consider reducing the size of your lawn. More flowers, more garden beds. Shrub beds, mulched, can provide seasonal interest. They don't have to be filled in every year. More and more people are looking for lawn alternatives like no-mow lawns like this, where you've got, you could either grow it like a meadow and cut it once a year in spring, or you can mow it once a month so that it does look more like a lawn. Dutch clover is very aggressive, but is a great pollinator plant. And University of Minnesota has some great information on growing bee lawns using thyme, if you have well-drained soil, clover, heel all, and to create a lawn that will bring in and support the native bees. And then maybe look for ground covers. This is one of my favorite barrenwort. So when the leaves emerge in the spring, you can see they have a little red tinge and they bloom at about that time. When the flowers finish in spring, the heart-shaped leaves are solid green. They're very dainty and they turn a brilliant red in fall. So you get lots of seasonal interest from this plant. Maybe it's garden beds instead, like you see here. The last thing to do is if you're considering a patio, a deck, any other kind of solid surface, can you make it a permeable surface? Now you need to consider use. Now this sitting area in Wisconsin, you probably aren't going to be sitting out there in the winter, so you don't have to worry about shoveling the snow. But walkways and things that you use year round, you've got to think about maintenance. When we have snowfall, if you're going to walk on it, how are you going to clear the snow and deal with ice? Permeable surfaces may be steppers with plants in between. It's a great way to add some steppers in a garden, help you move from one part of the yard to the other if you're using nothing but plants. If you have well-drained soil and sunny location, thyme is a great option with flagstone. Bees love the flowers, so keep that in mind. I find they don't bother me, but I'm not allergic. So if you have some bee allergies, you may want to skip this or use it in an area away from the house where people who do have the allergies don't frequent. And how about permeable pavers? This is our garden at We Energy Park. And probably about 15 years ago, We Energy said, we want people to look at the garden beds, but the grass dies on this walk every year. So let's just put a sidewalk. And I said, how about a permeable sidewalk? There's so much blacktop on our state fairgrounds. So Terra Firma landscaper, that with the help of the Wisconsin Landscape Contractors Association, installed this permeable pavers. We've had them, they work great and they work very well. In fact, we had a 1-inch rain during a state fair a few years ago. Between our garden beds that you can see one of them here, the permeable pavers, we have a rain garden and rain barrels. We didn't have standing water. Everywhere else on the grounds had an inch of water that I saw people, pushing it into the storm sewer. And you know what that water's like after a day at the fair. There are other products that you can use for driveways that you see here. So that may be an option as well. And this is my friend Will's yard, and he converted side-by-side townhouses, a duplex, into a one-family unit. And the city made him keep both driveways and make them interconnected. And he had beautiful gardens. So here's what the landscaper came up with. They put pavers, the width of the car tires, so it is truly a driveway. And then they filled the space with plants. So it really blends into the garden quite well, serves the intended purpose. You could do this for your driveway if you wanted. Last but certainly not least, I'd like to encourage you all to call 811. Or if you're in Wisconsin, file at diggershotline.com at least 3 business days before putting the first shovel in the ground. Whether you're building a rain garden, planting some flowers, you want to have those underground utilities located in your work area. It's a free service. You put the call in, you place the order, they send the utility companies out to mark any underground utilities in your work area. So that will help reduce the risk of injury, because if you hit an underground utility, you could be injured or even killed. Reduce the risk of inconvenience, because if you knock out the cable, your family is not going to be happy. And it saves you money, because if you damage an underground utility and you did not call them at least 3 days before starting the job, you're responsible for the repair. Who wants to spend their money on that when you could buy plants instead? I want to thank Fresh Coast Guardians and MMSD once again for supporting this and other webinars that I do for them and for all of you. As I mentioned, Fresh Coast Guardians is people just like you who want to support communities with inspiration, education, or by making a difference on their own yard, just helping to protect Lake Michigan as we build our landscape. So I want to thank them again. And thanks again to Milwaukee Public Library for hosting this webinar. I always enjoy seeing Beth and Kelly when I get to host. And as always, help me grow a garden or two. Someone inspired you, inspire the next generation to plant gardens, manage rainwater, or maybe it's a young family down the street. I want to build a kinder and gentler world, and I think together we can do that, one gardener and one garden at a time. I do have more webinars and appearances coming up, and some of them in conjunction with Milwaukee Public Library. I will be talking about growing ornamental fruits and vegetables on May 1st, sponsored by part of our library program, sponsored by We Energy. I will how to plant your rain garden, should be plant your rain garden. Sorry, on May 9th, missed that typo. And so we'll get you've hopefully planned it by then. You've ordered your plants or getting ready to, and we'll help you get them in the ground and tell you how to maintain them. And so hopefully you'll join me for future webinars as well. And in person, please stop by and say hello. I mentioned our library program sponsored by We Energies and the public libraries of Wisconsin and the Upper Peninsula. Besides webinars, you'll find videos and activities. Just go to my website, melindamyers.com. Click on this icon and it'll take you to those videos and activities that are updated every month, April through June. You have links to my contact information. Be patient if you send me questions. I'm trying to catch up with all of you. So now I am happy to answer any questions that we might have. And I see, we have a few.
We do. Here, I can read them for you.
Okay,
Let me just
thanks.
scroll back up to the top. All right, Susan would like to know, does compost attract rodents?
So if you are doing composting, finished compost, no. So that's a great question, Susan. So if you live in an urban area, check with your municipality. There are some that have restrictions because of rodent issues. And so some require certain type of composters. One of my favorite is a dual bin composter, 2 bins where you stockpile on one side, and once it's full, you start composting and then you stockpile in the other bin. They're made out of heavy duty hard plastic that most municipalities approve. So great question. So if you live in the city, that's the reality, right? Rodents are a reality. And so if you are composting, find out what those restrictions are. Some have limit what you can do. Some have guidelines on the type of composter. So thank you so much for asking. Once it's finished compost is not a problem because it's broken down and it's just, like it's almost like peat moss, sort of, not peat moss, but it's got that consistency. So you don't have those raw ingredients that the rodents are looking for, the plant debris and the melon rinds and things. Great question. Thank you for asking, Susan.
Okay. Renee is asking if we are looking for hardscaping to manage water in a driveway, like bricks or cement, is there a certification or training we should look for in a person installing? She was thinking along the lines of a LEED certification for energy.
That's a great question. They're starting to have some green. There's some organic gardening or organic landscaping certifications. None that I'm aware of. That's a great question. But what I would do, if you're in Southeast Wisconsin, there's a website called findalandscaper.org. And you could go on that and find landscapers in your area. And then I would ask to see the projects they've done, and I'd ask for references. And I think that's going to be your best bet. The company that did the installation on these permeable pavers, that was their first project. And since then, they've done quite a few because they saw how wonderful it worked and how effective it was. And so they've got quite the portfolio of permeable pavers. So you might want to, I would say, what have you done in terms of permeable surfaces for walks, drives? See some examples and then see if you can contact any of the people. I've had some work done in my house and I've had some great contractors and I have no problem talking to anyone because I've also had bad contractors and I don't want, so I'm always happy if somebody's given me good service to tell someone else about that. So that's a great question. As far as I know, there isn't a certification, but ask for references, ask to see their portfolio, ask about the jobs they've done. I don't think MMSD does, I don't think they provide a list of green infrastructure providers, but I would do that. And if, info@melindamyers.com, that's my email. And I'll do a little hunting to see if MMSD or anybody has a list of contractors. Let me know where you're at, first of all, so then that'll help me narrow it down. But if you're in Southeast Wisconsin, anybody looking for a contractor, findalandscaper.org is a place to start.
All right, awesome. It looks like somebody, Damien, put icpi.org in the chat as well, so I'm not sure what that website's for, but you can check it out.
And I wonder if that's Damien, was a former student who does water gardening. So I'm guessing that maybe Damien, if you're still with us, if you could write down the abbreviation, that's probably certified public a designer, maybe. So thank you, Damien. I will check that out too. And maybe if you're still on, if you could write it out for us what that stands for, we'd appreciate it.
Awesome. Yeah, it looks like he had sent a message that, yep, it's your former student. Thanks, Damien. All right. Anita would like to know if they're looking for bushes that drink a lot of water, what would you suggest? We need some help to soak up the water in our backyard before it gets into our basement.
Okay, so when I think of plants, so you bring up a good point. So when we put a rain garden, we don't put the rain garden in places where the water is standing, because then you end up with a water garden. And using shrubs is a great way to absorb some of the water. Make sure the grade is going away from your basement. So that would be the first thing I do before I plant more plants by the basement. If the grade's wrong, you're pushing water into the basement instead of away. Things that tolerate wet soil, aronia, our native aronia chokeberry is a wonderful plant. They use them a lot in rain gardens, and they have white flowers in the spring. They have fruit that persist into winter because it's very astringent. It's very high in antioxidants, and the birds will clean it up after it ferments on the plant, and brilliant red fall color comparable to burning bush as well. If you go into rain garden plants, listing of rain garden plants for your area, there will be some shrubs that are often identified. Elderberry is very aggressive. So if this was away from your house, kind of a hedge-like setting, elderberries will tolerate wet and will tolerate dry, but they do have a vigorous rhizome, so they spread, which would make a great hedge if you get them away from the house. There are some, like an Arctic blue willow. Again, that'd be one I keep away from the house so that we don't have gets to be about 6-7 feet tall, beautiful foliage. Root system not as aggressive, but it's a big plant, so you wouldn't want it right up against the house, would be a good one. Our native alders also help absorb moisture as well. So those would be a couple, but chokeberries, I don't know how much water and how far from your house that you need to place these. Even perennials will do a good job if you have enough room. Looking at like swamp milkweed, it's more of a clumper and it won't spread readily. Some of your sedges, palm sedge can be a little aggressive, but it's a beautiful plant, absorbs lots of water. We use that in rainwaters. Joe Pye weed is a big, bold, beautiful plant with a great root system that will absorb water as well. So you might want to look at, can you create, maybe you have some chokeberries and then you have some perennials and you have kind of a mixed border. And that way, if something happens to one of those plants, you don't lose the whole thing and you have more of a garden than just a water absorbing option. So check those out.
All right. Susan says, I have a long city lot that is below all my neighbors, and it often floods in heavy rains. Thankfully, it's not near the house. Can the native plants help in that area to lessen the flooding? This sounds a little similar to what we just talked about, but I figured I would read it.
No, I think that's a great idea. And so you may want to, the house I grew up in, all the neighbors changed their grade, and that water always ended up in my parents' backyard too. And we even had ducks sometimes. So I feel your pain. If there was any way, if you and your neighbors get along, that you could work collectively to try to create some ways to do that. One thing you might want to look into is a French drain, where if you dig down, you put a base of gravel, you put some landscape fabric over, then put soil on top. And the idea is the water comes in there and it drains down. Dry riverbed, if this is just a seasonal issue, kind of the same idea. Instead of putting grass over top or plants over top, that French drain, you would dig down, add some gravel so it drains faster, put some weed barrier, put some gravel. So then, or just create a swale in your backyard, not directing the water to your neighbors, because DNR has to be involved in that if you move water certain place across your borders. But you could do a dry riverbed so that as the water's draining, when there's a lot of water, it fills up. So you've got a kind of a swale in your backyard filled with landscape fabric and gravel, because you don't want the gravel going down, captures the water, then it drains down there. And that's one way that might help reduce the problem. So French drain, probably the best. Doing the plants as we talked about, trying to create maybe hedges that will help absorb that water on their way to collecting in your backyard. You got a long, narrow lot, that's always challenging. When I lived in the city, it was always hard to get everything I wanted to grow in my small city lot. So you might be looking at a rain garden above where the water collects, not where it collects. I don't know if you have space for that. And that might be an option for you too.
Okay. Susan asks, are any of the native plants toxic to dogs or cats?
Okay, I never answer that question because I don't trust my memory. And the place to look is the American Society Prevention of Cruelty to Animals, ASPCA.org. I think it is a .org or a .com, might be .com, but American Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals. They have a list of plants that are toxic and non-toxic. That's one place. The second place is the University of North Carolina Gardener's Toolbox. And it's their plant directory. And it's one of the best to talk about toxic plants to cats, dogs, and people. So I just do UNC Gardener's Toolbox. It gets me to their website. Then you do a search on the plant. And theirs is a lot more extensive because it's for gardeners, where ASPCA, I always check there, but then I also check University, North Carolina, Gardener's Toolbox, and it's got great information. They talk about growing conditions. If it's deer resistant, they talk about toxicity as well to cats, dogs, livestock, and people. So check those out.
Awesome. I put the links to those two places in the
Thank
chat,
you.
and then I will make sure we put those in our follow-up email too.
Oh, thank you.
Then you don't have to write it down, everybody. I know how it goes.
And that's exactly what everybody was doing. So thank you, Beth.
Yeah, no problem. But I get if you want to write it down too, that's fine. All right. Wendy would like to know, we have extremely sandy soil in Adams County. Her yard looks like something out of a Dr. Seuss book with barren spots and tufts and lumps of grass. I can visualize this. We have lots of dandelions, more than grass. How can we get the grass to grow and to absorb water and improve the soil condition? Fertilizer didn't work. Hubby says keep the leaves raked, and I disagree. The ticks will take over if we cut it at a taller height. What are we doing wrong? And what can we do to get it right? It's a lot.
It is a lot. Okay, so a couple things. The 4-inch grass isn't going to increase your tick population. And I have to tell you, ticks are out already on my property. So always do your tick checks, dress appropriately, take a hot shower within 2 hours when you're done in the garden. We need to be safe. I thought we'd have a little break, but I think it's going to be a great for the ticks, bad for us season. Leaving your leaves, if you shred them, that will definitely add organic matter. I have pure sand too. And you know what? My lawn is some grass, some weeds. I don't water it. It's too big and I'm not going to water it. I'm considering adding some Dutch clover. It's a little more drought tolerant, but then, getting it established is going to be challenging. So if you have the option to water, that's always the challenge. If you're going to do any grass seed. You may want to do some top dressing with compost that will eventually, those soil microorganisms will work it in. I'm guessing, here's what I would do. I would pick smaller sections and work on those because I think you're going to have a fair amount of work. You could try to get a slit seeder to try to get grass seed in there to get it established. You could try to do a bee lawn. University of Minnesota talks about it, but they talk about if your lawn's bad, starting over. I'm guessing you don't want to start over. If you do want to start over, adding organic matter, grading the soil, then spreading grass seed, mulching, water to get that seed to germinate, and you're going to be watering often in sandy soil. That's going to be the best way to get a thick, dense lawn of grass. You may decide that you just want some grass, you just want something to cover the soil so it looks better. Ours is a combination of weeds and grass, and it's good enough, but I'm out in the country. You may be in the city or in the suburbs and you want a better looking lawn. So one is starting over. That's going to be a lot of work. One could be get a slit seeder and overseed what you have. You're still going to need to do some watering. You're going to cut the lawn short or whatever's there, cut it short, get that grass seed in. Once it's sprouted, raise the mowing height as high as you can stand it. Okay, I get it. It's your lawn. And then that might be a way to beef things up. Fertilizing, the reason I recommend Milorganite, it's 85% organic matter. So you're feeding the soil as well as the grass. And you may want to start by doing Memorial Day, Labor Day, and sometime between Halloween and Thanksgiving before the ground freezes. You may want to beef up your fertilization at least these first couple years to get that lawn to thicken up. And water is key if you want a normal lawn, and that's one of the stresses. Fescues tend to be somewhat drought tolerant. You may want to try that, but I would beef up. I would just do some overseeding, if you can top dress with compost, then seed, that would be great. You wouldn't need a slit seeder, and fertilize. And I think it's just going to take time to beef up your lawn. I'm with you, Beth. I could picture that. It was a great description, unfortunately, right?
It was, but it could be beautiful too. I think
so.
I think you can do it.
This is the librarian. She's already got a story written for this
yes,
one.
Magical. I feel you. We just got rid of a trampoline, a big one in our backyard, and there's just a round dead spot.
Okay.
And so I'm working on it. It'll be fine. All right. Anita would like to know, we have a ton of ground elder in our backyard. Suggestions on how to get rid of it as it kills anything we plant around it.
I don't know a plant by that common name. Ground elder. I know ground ivy, creeping Charlie, creeping Jenny. I'm trying to think. Ground elder. I'm going to do a quick. Can we go to the next question while I do a quick? Is there another question while I try to look up ground elder while I answer the next question?
Yes,
I'm going to cheat here.
Otherwise, Anita, if you're still here, we're working on it. All right.
We're working on it.
You can do this one easy. Linda would like to know, what does a jumping worm look like?
Okay. So I'm going to try to, ground elder, I never have heard goutweed. That's, it's one of those common name things that didn't know. I'm going to try to back up and show you the picture of a jumping worm. So ground elder or Agapodium, I know it as not as barrenwort, as goutweed or bishop's weed. I've heard it so aggressive it makes even a bishop swear, and that's probably, you could believe that. So I learned something new. I didn't know that common name. So goutweed, bishop's weed, once grown as a ground cover, as you found, it's very, very aggressive and hard to kill. And so a couple of things. You may want to find the epicenter, edge that garden bed. That's so that if there are any plants outside of that garden bed, they're not feeding. What you're going to then cover either with black plastic for the summer or cook it with clear plastic for at least 6 to 8 of the hottest weeks of the year. And yes, I know that's a lot of time to give up, but that would get rid of that plant. You've probably tried using Roundup and not with a lot of success. And so it takes repeated applications. Again, if you can contain the worst part of it and do several treatments or mow it and continually cut it down, you eventually starve the plant to death. The Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources, if you do Wisconsin DNR and put in goutweed, I'm pretty sure they have, it's considered invasive. They may have some additional recommendations on treatment. That's always a great place for any invasive plant you're trying to get rid of. So thank you for your patience. So I've learned a new common name for bishop's weed or goutweed. So thank you for that. This is what the jumping worm looks like. They overwinter, though I'm wondering this year, I think I found a few in a few of my garden beds alive. They usually overwinter as cocoons or eggs the size of a mustard seed, so very tiny. In a season, they can grow like 6 or 8 inches long. They thrash around. They'll drop their tail to try to escape. And then you see that kind of it's a light pinkish beige ring towards the tip. That goes all the way around on a jumping worm, where on an earthworm, it only goes part way around. You can do, there's no great control for them. So avoiding them coming into your garden is the best thing. Ground mustard, using a mustard and watered solution, that will irritate them and bring them and regular earthworms to the surface. And some people will do that, one, to see if they have jumping worms, and two, once they're at the surface, to remove them. It's not a once and done. It's kind of a continual thing. Heating up your mulch or compost to 104 or 105 degrees for 3 days. I was reading the University of Maryland suggests that you spread that compost out 6 inches deep on plastic. Then you make a little pocket, so you close it up, so it seals it up, so it solarizes. Check the temperature after a few days. It needs to be at 104 degrees for at least 3 days. Now, in the garden, it doesn't work well, because if you treat a garden bed, they'll just go to a place that's not getting heated up and then come back when the temperature's cool. But if you're concerned about your compost or the compost you buy or the mulch, I know it's a pain, but it might be worth the extra effort. And then ask the provider, how are they managing their product for jumping worms? And if they go, then you know they're not managing them for jumping worms. And then you may need to take that into your own hands. That's why anytime you can repurpose evergreen needles and leaves off your own property, you know what you have. It's a great way to manage those resources and then avoid the problem with jumping worms if they're not in your landscape.
All right. Oop, we answered that one. Just 2 more. Susan
Okay.
asks, are any of the deep root plants, native plants, damaging to house foundations?
No, they tend to go deep down instead of like willows and some of your other trees that will go seek out water in the cracks of your foundation. So no, not a problem. They don't really put the pressure. The ones that spread by rhizomes, won't go into your foundation, but you might, it's always a good idea to keep at least a foot between the foundation, even more, the foundation of your house and the back edge of your garden, because you're going to need to get in there and do some work. And if you're using organic mulches, you'll have ground beetles, and carpenter ants don't nest in mulch. They get in your house looking for moisture and rotten wood. So it's not the mulch that brings them in. It's the tree that had the carpenter ants that was cut down, and they look for a new place, or where the dishwasher or the shower leaked and the wood rotted and the carpenter ants found their way in. But the insects in the mulch help break down the mulch, turn it into organic matter, releasing the nutrients. So not a problem with the foundation, but I try to leave at least some airspace and access between the house and that back row of plants.
Okay, and last question from Linda. Where can I get just the diverter kit? I have an old MMSD rain barrel, but I need a new diverter.
I know the pictures I showed you were from Gardener Supply. I'm sure you could go on the internet and just do a search for downspout diverter. I don't know if if you're in the MMS, you've got one of their rain barrels, it's worth a call. See if they have any diverters available that they would give you or sell you. But I know you can find them online as well.
Sorry, I was typing. Awesome. I just wanted to let everyone know that again, this recording will be made available to you a few days after tonight's program. It is Friday tomorrow, so I'm hoping they'll get it uploaded tomorrow, but otherwise check your emails early next week for sure. So don't worry if it's been a couple days. I just want to again thank Melinda for your time and for all of you for attending this evening. And any final parting words for us, Melinda?
No, it's going to be another interesting year. And if we all do our part, we can make it better for everyone. And I want to thank everyone who contributed it in the chat, who joined me this evening. Let's spread the word so we get more people helping to manage water where it falls. It's going to benefit us all. And thank you all for your time.
All right. Have a great evening, everyone. We'll see you next time. Good night.